Wednesday, December 17th, 2025. You are listening to the Daly Dose Sports Podcast, and I am your host, Clint Daly, coming to you from the Mile High City here in Denver, Colorado. And we are back for another week of talking sports with a dose of common sense. Hey, happy Wednesday to you. I hope you had a good weekend. I hope your week is going well, and that you, your family, your friends, everyone in your world is staying strong and healthy right now. And what a wild weekend it has been in the world of sports. Holy cow. Michigan football is involved in another cheating scandal. Well, sort of. I mean, it's a different kind of cheating. It apparently was cheating. Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza won the Heisman on Saturday, which Big Rob and I actually predicted a few weeks back. Although I think this last weekend, we both kind of pulled our votes when we kept seeing Fernando Mendoza do that fake crying thing in every single one of his interviews. That is a weird guy.
You're a weird guy, Ace. Weird guy.
Phillip Rivers is back in the NFL at the age of 44, which is ironic because I think that's also his belt size. And just as he did in his prime, he almost won a game. The Kansas City Chiefs are out of the NFL playoffs. The Denver Broncos have the best record in football. What year is it? How long have I been out? Was I asleep? We also saw superstars Patrick Mahomes and Micah Parsons blow their knees out on the same day. Now, that actually might be due. I'm not sure if I've ever seen that before. I don't remember two big stars having a season-ending injury on the same day before. A little bit different. But speaking of things we have already seen, the college football playoff kicks off this Friday, and we are going to get a rematch, actually two rematches, of games that we have already seen this year. At 6 p.m., the 10-3 9-seed Alabama Crimson Tide will head into Norman to face the number 8 seed 10-2 Oklahoma Sooners. Now, the winner is going to move on and face number 1 Indiana. But of course, you remember, these two teams already squared off earlier this year in Tuscaloosa. And the Sooners actually squeaked out a 23-21 win on the road. So how in the world is Alabama going to go into Norman and win this game? Well, I think they're mostly going to do it because they actually have some offense. And it doesn't seem like Oklahoma does. Remember, in that first matchup, Alabama completely outplayed the Sooners, but they kept turning the ball over. Okay, so in this game, Alabama is favored by 1.5. I'm not going to feel great about it, but I'm going to take Alabama to go into Oklahoma to win and to cover. We move on to Saturday morning, where the 10 a.m. game is going to feature the number 10 Miami Hurricanes going to College Station, Texas, to face the number 7 Texas A&M Aggies. Of course, the winner of this game will go on to face number 2 Ohio State. Now, let me ask you this. Why is this game not in prime time? I have no idea. This should be the best game of the first round. Now, Miami has been dominant up front in pretty much every game they played this year. They're going to be good again here, but I don't know that they can push around A&M. Here's what I want to watch in this game, especially early. Who can run the ball? Because that's going to be a big advantage. And I want to see which version of Texas A&M quarterback Marcel Reed we're going to get. Because we've seen him be really good, and we've seen him be really bad. In fact, we've seen it in the same game. If he's good, I think the Aggies are going to roll here. If he's not, I think this is going to be a dogfight, and I think it could come down to the last possession. A&M is favored by 3.5. I don't know if Miami has been in an environment like College Station will be, though. I'm going to take the Aggies to cover and win. 1:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, we will have the number 11 seed Tulane Green Wave, winners of that American Athletic Conference, heading to Oxford to face the number 6 Ole Miss Rebels again, because yes, we have seen this game already too. You might remember the Rebels pasted the Green Wave back in September 45-10. But remember, that was when Ole Miss still had their head coach Lane Kiffin. He is now left for LSU, so this could be a totally different outcome. Then again, Tulane head coach John Summerall is also leaving. He's going to Florida. Never mind. Ole Miss is favored by 17.5. I actually think they're going to cover that number. I'll take Ole Miss big, and they will move on to face Georgia, an SEC matchup that should be very interesting. Our final first-round college football playoff game will feature the number 12 James Madison Dukes, winner of the Sun Belt Conference, facing the number 5 Oregon Ducks. And I'll say this, if you haven't seen the JMU Sports social media account, where they are just over there talking crazy about the Ducks, you're missing out. They're killing it. It's pretty funny. But also remember, James Madison head coach Bob Chesney is leaving for UCLA, and James Madison has not seen speed like this. Oregon is favored by 21.5. That's a huge number. And yet, I'm not sure it's big enough. I think Oregon rolls and covers and moves on to play Texas Tech. I'm not sure we're going to get great games in this first round. Oh, but that second round, yeah, you can tell it might be highly, highly entertaining. Hey, today on The Dose, I've got something completely different for you. I know everyone is talking about the college football playoff this week. Hey, I love college sports. I love college football every year. I love March Madness every year. There is nothing more exciting than seeing college athletes trying to make a name for themselves. I've been watching it since I was a little kid. Well, I've got some bad news. With the way that all of these things have transpired in college athletics, with universities now paying athletes, I'm telling you, there could be another shoe about to drop. I've been warning that this was coming, and it might not be pretty. College sports, as we know them, could actually cease to exist. And I know that sounds crazy, but unfortunately it's true. I've got a guest today that understands these things far better than I, and I think it's going to be well worth your time to listen to. In fact, let's jump into that interview right now. Joining us this week on the Daily Dose, Thomas McGovern is a CPA, CFA, and CFO. He has spent 2 decades on Wall Street. Not only does he have financial expertise, but he also has a deep passion for college sports. Makes him someone I want to talk to. Thomas has recently authored a book called Road to the Final Hour: The Catastrophic Tax Consequences of the Professionalization of College Sports. But here's what I like about Thomas in this book. Thomas has not only diagnosed a problem, that's easy to do. A lot of people diagnose problems. We hear it on sports talk all the time. Oh, here's a problem, here's a problem. He also has a blueprint for a solution, makes it very, very different when you're actually saying, well, here's how to fix it. Thomas is joining us today to discuss practical strategies to avoid these consequences and some of his ideas for affecting real change. He is here to tell us how to preserve college sports before it's too late. Thomas McGovern, welcome to the Daily Dose.
Thank you, Clint. Glad to be here.
Thomas, where did your passion for college, sports, amateur sports in general, come from? Were you a former athlete, or how did this all get started?
No, not a former athlete, a fan.
Okay.
Professional sports, grew up in New York, so it was very much a pro environment. But later on, going to Virginia for grad school and now living in the South in Charlotte, college sports truly is a big institution down here, somewhat of a religion.
Yeah.
And it's an important part of our culture in the United States. And, that's why I wrote the book. And I would say the genesis of the book, already having a passion for college sports, I also served on different governing boards for colleges and universities that kind of dovetail with athletics. And I attended a conference 8 years ago of the Association of Governing Boards of Colleges and Universities in Dallas. And at the time, they were talking about a lot of different issues. You had freedom of speech, you had declining enrollment, you had rising costs of education, and of course, intercollegiate athletics. And one of the things they noted is that these trustees, some of whom served on their athletic committees on their boards, they were concerned that not only would these recent trends, back 8 years ago trends, right? Not only would those trends increase their costs, but they could potentially jeopardize their tax-exempt status. And, one trustee put it, we will have killed the golden goose. And, they really did have some consternation about this. Now, my thought as someone that was there was that, okay, it's good that you guys kind of understand this, right? You guys are people that can afford to donate millions of dollars to be on a board of trustees. But I don't think there really is a general understanding of this out there amongst the broader fan base. And so I ended up writing a larger book about higher education when I was on non-compete leave, and then it went back on the shelf when I returned to work. But in the last several years, as these trends have accelerated with college sports, I realized I had to kind of carve that part of it out and publish it as a separate book.
Okay. Thomas, with the change in college athletics, Players, of course, can now be paid by the universities. This is no longer amateur athletics. You talk about it in your book, but what is the collision course that college sports is on? And, why in the world are you looking less at compensation and more at the taxation side?
Yeah, I would say, even though that amateurism is no longer really applicable to current college sports, I don't think it ever was in the colloquial sense that we use amateurism, right?
You're right.
I think amateurism kind of developed this voluntarism intonation, and it's never been accurate. Right? It probably hasn't been accurate for about 100 years. And I would say today, even with revenue sharing and NIL, I do believe that college sports still would fall under kind of the definition of what I call non-professionalism, right? It's not voluntarism, but you do receive some compensation, similar to the way Olympic athletes receive endorsements and whatnot, but they compete for free. And I believe that is conducive to tax exemption. And one of the things that you do see a lot, or hear a lot rather, is that there is a dialogue out there that with all the controversy around NIL, and there's no shortage of complaints about it, that it would be simpler and maybe more transparent if the athletes were simply paid employees of the school on a roster of, football team, basketball team, a revenue sport. This does neglect some very serious, tax and financial implications. One of the big reasons that college sports has been so successful over the last decades is that it has been exempt from taxes, federal taxes, as well as most state taxes. And so if you have a situation whereby players are employed as professional athletes, that's no longer something that deserves charitable exemption, right? They have a twofold exemption in the code. They contribute importantly to the educational mission of the schools, and they also promote amateur athletics. Under a professionalized system, neither of those would apply. They would lose their tax exemption. And as I described in the book, the financial consequence of that would really be catastrophic.
Thomas, your background is a little bit unique. I'm coming more from the sports side, from the coaching side of things. I look at this and it doesn't all make sense to me, but you're looking at it as a completely different angle. You're looking at it from the side of being a CPA, CFA, that kind of thing. How does that financial expertise and experience give you a different view of this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, as a Wall Street analyst and banker, I'm used to looking at P&Ls and balance sheets. And, what I see with regard to college sports P&Ls is that, their revenue, for the most part, on the FBS side or among FBS programs, a plurality of their revenue is generated from conference distributions, media rights, revenue they've already agreed to share as part of the House settlement. What is their second largest source of revenue at the FBS level is charitable contributions. And so now if you have a loss of tax exempt status, they would no longer be able to solicit those charitable contributions, or they could solicit them, but they would no longer be tax deductible. And in the fundraising world, that really is the kiss of death. You can probably expect that to dry up to next to nothing. And so you have a serious loss of revenue from both the loss of charitable contributions as well as revenue sharing. And you're also going to see government support and institutional support kind of erode as well. And that's FCS and no football. Those subdivisions actually generate most of the revenue that way. And I don't think it's going to be possible for governments and institutions to support something that's not really a charity anymore. And so you have a big revenue effect. And then on the expense side, you're going to have a very large increase in player costs, right?
Sure.
Today, let's not say today, last year, the 2023 to 2024 academic year, the average cost of a public institution for an out-of-state student was roughly $24,000. So if you think about a scholarship for somebody that costs $24,000 a player versus what you would be paid under employment, which, people are not going to be getting LeBron James money. I think that is very much a fantasy. You would look more to like the NBA G League or perhaps arena football. And let's just say someone's getting paid $50,000 a year, right? Base salary. So now you've doubled your costs. And the problem with this now is that even at a $50,000 base salary, on an after-tax basis, that's barely covering your costs to attend that school. And so you're probably going to need to keep the grant and aid component to it. So now your costs have actually tripled. And this, while it sounds like, okay, a small number on an individual basis, or maybe even a program basis across the system, it reaches into over $1 billion of cost. So now you've got costs through the roof, you've got revenue down, And what's ever left over is actually subject to federal taxes under something called unrelated business taxable income. So you'd have a 21% federal tax rate, and you'd be exposed to state taxes as well. So what that would mean, at least, even for the most successful programs, is that it would diminish or perhaps eliminate their ability to subsidize non-revenue sports. And for certain less successful programs, they may not even be able to pay their bills at the revenue sport level, so they become insolvent. So you're talking about a very systemic issue here under professionalization.
Hey, just a quick reminder, you should be stopping by DailyDoseSports.com each and every week and checking out the new things we've got going on over there. We have links to the podcast, we have links to the video, and we have links to new articles that I post each week that are a little more local in flavor. In fact, I posted one this week about the Denver Broncos getting a big win over the Green Bay Packers. If you didn't see that, you might want to go check it out. Also, remember, you can email the podcast at dailydosesports@gmail.com. Love to hear from you listeners. Always entertaining. And you can pick up some Daly Dose gear over at dailydosesports.com as well. T-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, baseball caps. You might be needing that one last gift for someone on your list. Make sure you head over to dailydosesports.com. Thomas, the headline number in your book is $5.7 billion with a B. You just talked about it. You laid that out a little bit. $5.7 billion. They're going to want that money. That's a hefty amount.
It's a big number, and that is a revenue number. So that doesn't include the costs I just went through, and it doesn't include the taxes. That number is a composite of the foregone revenue from the loss of charitable contributions, loss of government support, and institutional support across all three of the major subdivisions of college sports, right? FBS, FCS, and no football, and that represents roughly 44% of the revenue of all of those schools put together, right? Essentially all of college sports put together is roughly a $12.9 billion annual revenue.
Okay.
Based on 2023 numbers. It's probably a little larger now, but the loss of that money would be substantial, right? You think about 44% decline in revenue, and this doesn't include revenue share. And then you've got a trebling of expenses. And then on top of that, taxes. You're talking about a prescription for financial disaster.
Thomas, can you explain UBTI? I believe it's unrelated business taxable income.
Taxable income, yeah. Okay. It's tax that is weighed on essentially an organization or entity that's normally tax exempt, like a church or a school, engaging in a business that is not considered to be important to its charitable purpose. And so certain churches have actually gotten hit with it by operating, for kind of what they consider to be somewhat for-profit enterprises on the side. The IRS has ruled that's not really part of the church's mission. Similarly, a professionalized college athletic system would really no longer contribute importantly to the educational mission of the colleges and universities. So it would be considered kind of an outside, unrelated business, and therefore subject to unrelated business taxable income.
That's getting a little bit scary. I got to ask you this. This came out this past week. The University of Utah announced a plan to help their athletic department generate new revenue streams. They're talking about maybe kind of a first of what they say could be many. They're talking about they could generate some serious revenue with a private equity firm. Does this model make any sense for other universities, or is this something we're going to see?
Yeah, and there's been at least a couple of headlines on that, and I think, look, private equity investment is a good thing. These sponsors come into companies that are relatively middle stage or not ready to be public yet, and this is in the for-profit world. But what I think college sports would want is a financial investor, right? And so one that's not interested in any other ulterior motives. I think there was a private equity investor out there that I felt might have been more activist than financial oriented, and that's not going to be a good thing. But I think the issue with private equity is that private equity, for the most part, if they're going to be a passive financial investor, they're going to want to invest in something that's profitable. Right. And if this model is not profitable, then private equity is not going to be interested in investing in it.
Why is it absolutely critical, and it is, that average college sports fans understand this whole situation, that they understand what a threat this really can be to college programs?
Yeah, it's very important that the broader fan base understand this. There is, unfortunately, a group of people that's very small that understands this topic very well, and a kind of a broader group that needs to be somewhat educated on it. And there is a bill in Congress right now called the SCORE Act. It's making its way, I think, onto the floor of the House, and it's likely going to pass the House. And this bill actually does, creates the entire composite of legislative goals that are necessary. What we talked about 8 years ago at that conference, This does all the things that, that they wanted, that we wanted. First, it regulates NIL, instead of it being a patchwork of state laws. And then secondly, it creates an exemption from antitrust legislation for the governing bodies in college sports. So the various conferences, maybe the College Sports Commission, the NCAA, they can enforce rules without being beset by antitrust lawsuits.
Sure.
And the third thing that it does, it makes it very clear that college athletes are not employees of the schools they play for. They remain independent contractors, which means they retain their NIL rights. They will likely do better financially with those than they would under employment. And then the sports system, college sports system, can retain its charitable tax exemption. And this, while maybe we'll pass the House, faces somewhat of an uphill battle in the Senate. So it's important that the broader fan base of, however many college football fans there are out there, 100 million, really understands this and pushes for the passage of this bill, because it's going to mean the future of college sports.
It absolutely is. And what you're saying makes so much sense. I'm asking you the million dollar question here, and this might be difficult to answer, but if we don't see this pass in the next 2 to 5 years, we've already seen the changes that have taken place so quick already. Can you paint kind of a picture of what we're going to see going forward?
Yeah, I think if you don't have any action by Congress, the unfortunate default is going to be employment. College athletes will be employees of their institutions. You'll see unionization. You'll see collective bargaining, and that will void their charitable exemption. So all those financial issues that I mentioned will come to pass. And then I think it's going to accelerate a lot of trends that sports fans are already complaining about, right? Conference realignments for the sake of generating more revenue that create these, hectic schedules with crazy travel requirements. You're going to see a lot more of that. And I actually think it could even get worse. And you'll see certain schools that are very successful perhaps look to kind of negotiate their own deals, similar to like Notre Dame having its own contract with NBC, to try to disintermediate the conferences to get a larger revenue share to cover their higher costs. And then you'll see really the larger programs doing a lot better vis-a-vis the smaller ones or the less successful ones. And so I think you could see some issues there with certain programs going away, having scheduling issues, it becoming a much different landscape than it is today.
Well, and I know the pushback that someone like you is probably going to get. The pushback is going to be, hey, you're just opposed to these college kids making money. They might not understand the ramifications of what's involved in this. You're not opposed to that. You're trying to protect them. And as usual, so many times we see adults get involved with kids, not actually doing what's best for kids.
Yeah, it's the opposite of that. I actually want to see college athletes prosper. I think it's been a good thing in a lot of ways that student athletes are sticking around versus going directly into the NFL.
Absolutely.
I get it. It's right. You maybe have some insurance against career-ending injury that maybe pays you $1 million if you get hurt, whereas you're going to get a contract for 8 figures. The math, just simple math, right? Today with NIL, some of these athletes are doing very well. So I think it's a good thing. Now they are going to do a lot better under NIL than they would under employment. Like I said, for the most part, student athletes would be paid commensurate to NBA G League, Arena Football League, minor league baseball players. Very few would ever get something like what the superstars get. However, under NIL, they retain their NIL rights. They can make unlimited money. They can get as many endorsements as they want. There may ultimately be a cap under some of the legislation that's coming out, but for the most part, their upside's pretty significant. As a full-time employee, you would expect them likely to relinquish those rights. The schools would need to capture that revenue in order to pay for their higher costs. So at the end of the day, employment and unionization and collective bargaining helps very few, if nobody, hurts everybody. Everyone is better off in the environment that would be created by comprehensive federal legislation to give these college governing bodies a tax exemption, an antitrust exemption, keep the industry's tax exempt status, and make sure that players retain independent contractor status and their rights to NIL.
Hey, this is such an important issue. And not only are we talking about, the biggest and the best, and of course the big dogs are going to succeed. But what about some of the mid-level sports? What about some of the athletes that they're not going to get big? But we've got to protect all these kids, because if left as it is, this is all going to go away.
Yeah, it's especially going to be important for non-revenue sports, and that if they do require or kind of live off the subsidies from the revenue sports. And if that model is impaired with higher costs and lower revenue, there really won't be very much revenue left for the non-revenue sports. And those sports are the way that we incubate our Olympic talent. One of the exemptions in the code for college athletics was created in 1976 after our poor showing in the Montreal Olympics against the Soviets, to allow there to be a capitalized system with a tax exemption for incubating Olympic athletes. If we don't have revenue sports supporting those with their excess profits, then it's going to be interesting how they would support themselves. They would likely have to rely on contributions. And that presupposes that there isn't a contagion of professionalization into non-revenue sports. What you're seeing already is Title IX kind of cropping up as a means to challenge certain of the things that are going on, like the House settlement, right? Now, Title IX, if people are not kind of familiar with it, it's a federal law passed in the 70s, kind of preventing discrimination against women by educational institutions. And it led to the crop up of a lot of new women's programs in college sports, which was a good thing. I think, unfortunately, today it can work in the other direction. If professionalization is viewed as being favorable vis-a-vis non-professionalization, and, at the end of the day, the really lion's share of revenue sports are men's sports. If that's seen as a form of discrimination, there could be a call to say, well, all athletes should be employed, revenue and non-revenue. And there simply isn't enough money in the system for that to happen. So you would ultimately just have to see schools would have to make decisions, hard decisions, and you would likely see a lot of cuts in these non-revenue sports. And it's a shame, because this is a way over 100,000 or hundreds of thousands of students finance their education every year and actually have an opportunity to succeed in the United States.
Well, and you bring up a really good point, because not only is it the collegiate athletes, it's the Olympic athletes. There's a lot of people that are going to lose that revenue, and they're going to lose these opportunities. It's so many of them that are not just changing, their year, or they're changing their lives, and we can't lose track of that. Okay, Thomas, I've got to ask you this. Where can listeners find your book? Where can they follow you? Where can they keep up with what you have going on? Because I really like what you're saying. What you're saying makes so much sense. But I mean, I know for me, I want to keep up with your thoughts, as well as, seeing how things, progress and that kind of thing. Where can we keep up with you?
Yeah, a book is available on Amazon. Go on there. It's called Road to the Final Hour. It's basically a road to the Final Four, where you're getting rid of one letter and replacing an F with an H. So Road to the Final Hour, Thomas McGovern on Amazon. You can also check out my website, thomasmcgovern.cpa. And in the new year, myself and Spirit Media are going to be launching a podcast where we're going to talk about certain issues on a week-by-week basis. I do expect there's going to be some acceleration in what goes on in Washington next year.
Yeah.
The SCORE Act kind of lost some ground, given there was a government shutdown and a lot of other priorities. But I do think it's going to be a goal for that bill to pass both houses of Congress and go to President Trump by the end of next year. And so you're going to see a lot more headlines on that going into 2026.
Well, Thomas, I cannot thank you enough for stopping by, for shedding light on what is a hugely important, situation, and something that's got to be fixed, and it's got to be improved, because right now I understand kids are making good money. And I understand that right now we're kind of playing in the Wild West with college athletics. People have to know that stuff's going to dry up. It's going to go away very, very quick as soon as, some of these things start to take place, and it might get really, really ugly. And I'm worried for that. I'm scared for a lot of our collegiate athletes, and a lot of our, a lot of people that might be listening and say, well, I don't have a college athlete yet. Well, you're going to. Like, your kids are in school now. They're going to be looking forward to that. Okay, I've got one more question for you before I let you go. And again, I want to thank you for your time. I've got to ask the big question. College football playoff. Are you putting in Notre Dame? Would you put in Miami? Would you put in Alabama? What would have been your pick? How would you have gone? Think the committee got it right?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's interesting, because you saw, University of Virginia, where I went to grad school.
Yeah.
You saw them play what ultimately was a disastrous game against Duke. And, and that resulted in Miami being elevated to the playoff.
Getting in, yeah.
Vis-a-vis Notre Dame. And, I actually think Notre Dame was the stronger team, but they did have a loss to Miami. And so it's a tough decision, right?
Yeah.
I would have voted for Notre Dame, being in, McGovern, an Irish guy going back.
Of course.
Everybody's a Notre Dame fan when you're Irish. So I would have voted for them. But I do understand the logic of the decision.
I do too. Thomas, I want to thank you so much for your time. I genuinely appreciate it. Hey, we'd love to have you back anytime. But I just want to thank you for stopping by and shedding some light on what really is an important subject.
Great. Thank you, Clint. Great being here.
Hey, next week on The Dose, once again, I have something completely different for you. It is going to be our Christmas Eve show. Oh, but I am chasing a guest that is going to make this Christmas Eve show unique and hilarious. Trust me, you will not want to miss it. Be sure you check out The Dose next week and make sure you let a friend know to do the same. Hey, I want to say thank you so much to Thomas McGovern for stopping by and enlightening us with his knowledge on college sports. And I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for listening to the Daily Dose every week. Thank you for the emails. Thank you for the texts. Thank you for the tweets. But more than anything, thank you for sharing the show, for sharing the videos, and for sharing the articles. We absolutely love it when you do that. I have to say thank you to JSP. Could not do any of this without you. I will see you all next Wednesday. Have a great week, everybody.